My daughter-in-law had already measured the master bedroom before I was out of the recovery room. I did not know that at the time. I found out later from a neighbor who had seen the tape measure come out of her purse in the driveway while my son Marcus was helping her carry boxes from the trunk of their Infiniti. I was still in the cardiac care unit at Piedmont Atlanta Hospital, still attached to monitors, still working through what the cardiologist had explained to me about what a widowmaker feels like from the inside. Sharon, that is my daughter-in-law's name, Sharon had already decided what the bedroom would become before I had been transferred out of intensive care. I am telling you this not to make you angry, though I understand if it makes you angry. I am telling you this because the rest of what I am about to tell you only makes sense if you understand who Sharon is and what she believed about people like me. People who are old enough to have built something. People who are living alone in a house with a guest room and a paid-off mortgage and a retirement account that has had 30 years to compound without interruption. People who have recently had a heart attack and are, in the clinical language my son borrowed and repurposed for his own purposes, a fall risk living independently in an oversized property. That is what Marcus called me in a conversation I was not supposed to hear. A fall risk living independently in an oversized property. My name is Gerald Moss. I am 67 years old. I live in Decatur, Georgia, in a house I bought in 1999 with a woman named Beverly who spent the next 19 years making it into something that could not have existed without her. Beverly died of pancreatic cancer in October of 2022. She was 63 years old. She was the most specific person I have ever known, which I mean as the highest compliment I am capable of giving. She did not approximate. She did not settle for almost. She knew exactly what she meant, and she said it quietly and without performance. And she was right about things, more often than anyone I have ever met has any right to be. Beverly collected antique hand mirrors, not the ornate silver kind that belonged in a museum. The small, plain, sometimes imperfect ones, oval mirrors in pine frames, rectangular mirrors with painted borders, a round one with a crack along the upper left corner that she found at an estate sale in Macon and loved precisely because of the crack, because she said a perfect mirror only shows you what you expect to see. She kept them on the wall of the upstairs hallway, 17 of them arranged in a way that took her 11 years to get right, and that I have never touched since she got it right. Every mirror in a slightly different position, every one hung by Beverly's own hands, at a height she calculated based on the light from the hall window in the afternoon. When I came home from the hospital on a Thursday morning in March and walked through my own front door, on my own 2 feet, slowly, yes, with one hand on the railing, but on my own 2 feet the hallway wall was bare. Every mirror was gone. I stood in the entryway for a long time. I counted the nail holes. 17. I counted them twice, because I am an accountant and I count things. 41 years as a CPA, the last 18 in my own practice, and I still count things when I need to be sure of what I am looking at. 17 nail holes in a wall that had held 17 mirrors that Beverly had arranged over 11 years. I did not call my son. I did not go looking for Sharon. I walked to the kitchen, which had been reorganized in a way that someone probably thought was helpful, and I stood at the window and looked at the backyard where Beverly's vegetable garden was still dormant in the March cold, and I thought very carefully about what I was going to do next. Here is what you need to understand about me before I tell you the rest. I spent 4 decades reviewing other people's financial lives. Tax returns, business ledgers, estate documents, the quiet arithmetic of what people have built and what they owe and what they intend to leave behind. I understand that most disasters do not arrive as disasters. They arrive as small decisions that seemed reasonable in isolation. A missed payment, a document signed without reading, a conversation that felt like a conversation but was actually something else. I am very good at reading what is underneath the surface of a thing. Beverly used to say that being married to an accountant meant she never had a surprise bill in her life, and very rarely had a surprise of any other kind either. She did not always mean it as a compliment, but she usually did. I had been reading the surface of Marcus and Sharon's situation for approximately 18 months before the heart attack. Marcus is my younger son, 40 years old. He works in commercial insurance, or he did until the firm he worked for contracted, and his position was eliminated in November of 2023. Sharon is a project coordinator for a mid-size marketing agency, which is a title that meant more before the agency lost two of its three major clients in the same fiscal quarter. They have one child, a 7-year-old named Caleb, who is funny and perceptive and completely without blame in any of this. They had been renting a house in Alpharetta for 6 years, and the lease, I would later confirm, was not renewed when it came up in January. My older son, Darnell, lives in Portland. He is a high school basketball coach. He calls on Sunday evenings without being reminded, usually around 7, usually from his car because he says it is the only place quiet enough to have a real conversation. He drove down when Beverly died and stayed for 2 weeks and helped me with every difficult thing without making me feel that any of it was a burden. He flew in when I had the heart attack and sat with me in the hospital for 3 days before I told him to go home to his players, that I had it from here. He asked me 4 times if I was sure. I told him I was sure. He said he would be on a plane in 4 hours if I needed him. I knew he meant it. I also knew he could not afford the flights. I told him to save his money and call me Sunday. Sharon had already moved their bedroom furniture into my master before Darnell's plane left Atlanta. The heart attack was February 19th. I was in the hospital for 11 days, which is longer than a standard cardiac event warrants, but my recovery was complicated by a secondary issue with my blood pressure medication that required adjustment under monitoring. 11 days is a long time to be away from a house where someone has decided the configuration no longer suits them. What I came home to was a systematic repositioning of everything Beverly had built in this house. The mirrors gone from the hallway. Beverly's reading chair, the green linen one from the corner of the living room that had a permanent shallow indentation from 30 years of Beverly sitting in it, moved to the garage. The kitchen reorganized with Sharon's things in the cabinets where Beverly's things had always been. My home office, which had always been the second bedroom, was now Caleb's room. Sharon's mother, a woman named Diane I had met 3 times in 10 years, had moved into the third bedroom, and Marcus and Sharon were sleeping in the master bedroom, in the room where Beverly had died with my hand on hers and a window cracked open because she had always slept with a window cracked open, even in winter. I walked through every room. I did not speak to anyone. Sharon was in the kitchen and said something about how glad she was. I was home safe and asked if I was hungry. I said I had eaten. I went to the hall bathroom, closed the door, sat on the edge of the tub, and called my attorney. Her name is Patricia Osei. She has offices on Commerce Drive in Decatur, 10 minutes from my house. Trusts and estates, property law, 30 years of practice. I have worked with her since 2009 on various matters. Beverly and I had our wills done through Patricia. After Beverly died, I called Patricia within a month. I told her I wanted to review everything. I did not tell her why yet. I told her I just wanted to be sure things were correctly structured. She said that was sensible and told me to come in the following week. I had called Patricia 17 months before the heart attack because of something Marcus had said at Thanksgiving of 2022, 6 weeks after Beverly's funeral. He was standing in Beverly's kitchen with a glass of bourbon, and he looked around the room the way someone looks around a room when they are calculating its square footage. And he said, "This house is really more than one person needs, Dad." He said it casually. The way you say something you have been thinking for a while, but have been waiting for the right moment to release. Sharon nodded from across the table. She nodded the nod of someone who had heard that sentence before, who had in fact helped compose it. I said I liked the house and changed the subject, but I did not forget the nod. Patricia listened to everything I had observed over the following months. The Thanksgiving comment. The follow-up call in January, where Marcus asked whether I had a financial planner and mentioned that he knew someone very good who specialized in retirement planning for single seniors. The conversation in March, where Sharon mentioned, twice, a beautiful continuing care community in Peachtree City that a friend's parents had moved into and absolutely loved. The phone call in August where Marcus asked whether I had thought about what I wanted to do with the house long term, and I said I hadn't, and he said, "Well, you probably should," in a tone that did not sound like concern. Patricia listened to all of it. When I finished, she said, "Gerald, I want to ask you something directly. Do you believe your son intends to take your house?" I said, "I believe my son believes he deserves my house. Those are different things, but they arrive at the same place." She said, "All right. Then let's make sure the place they arrive at is one you have already secured." What followed across 2 meetings, and 6 weeks of documentation was the establishment of the Gerald A. and Beverly J. Moss Family Trust. The house on Lakeview Drive transferred into the trust in April of 2023. Patricia became successor trustee. Darnell was named residential beneficiary. The trust document was specific, thorough, and in the event that anyone wanted to challenge it, airtight in the way that only 30 years of estate litigation experience can make a document airtight. Patricia also suggested the cameras. She suggested them the way she suggests everything directly and without softening it, with diplomacy she doesn't have time for. She said, "Gerald, if someone is going to make a move on your estate, they will say things in your house that they would not put in writing. I want those things documented. I want them time-stamped. I want them in a format I can use in any proceeding, civil or criminal, should it come to that." I said, "Do you think it will come to that?" She said, "I think your son is not acting alone, and I think his wife is smarter about this than he is, which means I want everything on record." I ordered the camera system the following afternoon. My neighbor Raymond, who had been my neighbor for 14 years and who had known Beverly since before the vegetable garden existed, came over on a Saturday and helped me install 6 cameras. Living room, kitchen, front entryway, upstairs hallway, back hallway, the landing at the top of the stairs, all flush-mounted, all connected to cloud storage with a rolling 90-day archive. Raymond asked while we were installing the last one if I was doing okay. I said I was fine. He said Beverly would have called all of this very practical. I said that was the nicest thing anyone had said to me in months. The cameras had been running since May of 2023. The heart attack happened 9 months later. I want to tell you what it was like to stand in that hallway and count the nail holes where Beverly's mirrors had been, because I think it matters for what comes after. What I felt in that moment was not grief and not rage, though both of those things were present underneath. What I felt first, before everything else, was recognition. This is what I had prepared for. Not the specifics. Not the mirrors specifically, or the green chair, or Diane's casserole dishes lined up in my pantry where Beverly's canning jars used to be. But this. The shape of this. The shape of a person walking into what someone else built and deciding without asking that it now belongs to them. I am an accountant. I have spent 41 years looking at what things actually are underneath what people say they are. And what this was, underneath the talk about helping and support and a house this size not being safe for one person, was a claim. It was a claim dressed as concern. And I had been ready for it since April of 2023. I walked to the kitchen. I made my own tea. I sat at the table where Beverly and I had eaten breakfast every morning for 19 years. Sharon came in and said she had put clean sheets in the guest room for me. Not the master, the guest room. In my own house. She said it with warmth and complete confidence, the confidence of a woman who had already decided that the geometry of the house had been reorganized and that I would simply accept the new geometry. I said thank you. I drank my tea. I went to the guest room, lay down, and did not sleep for a long time. But I was not lying awake in anguish. I was lying awake thinking about Tuesday. Patricia's message came at 10:15 that evening. One name, one address, Roosevelt Gaines. Decatur Square, 9 in the morning. I was there at 8:50. Roosevelt Gaines was a 61-year-old man with a methodical way of speaking and a desk that was almost aggressively clear of unnecessary paper. 26 years, serving civil process in DeKalb County. He shook my hand and said, "I understand you have a residential situation." I told him my son had moved his family into my house while I was recovering from a cardiac event. He asked whether Marcus's name appeared on any deed, mortgage, or title document. I said no. He asked whether the property was held in trust. I said since April of 2023. He said, "All right, here is what happens Tuesday." He laid it out for me the way a good professional lays things out. A notice to vacate delivered in person at 8 in the morning, 48 hours to remove themselves and all personal property. If not complied with, a filing for unlawful detainer with DeKalb County Superior Court, he said. In my experience, it rarely goes to filing. I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because when people see the paperwork and understand what the trust structure means, they understand that the alternative involves a judge. And people who have been planning quietly for months are rarely prepared for how fast things move when the legal machinery is already in place." He said, You're very calm for someone in this situation, I said. I have been in this situation longer than my son knows. He almost smiled. He said, Tuesday at 8. That evening, I opened the camera system's archive portal for the first time since coming home. I want to be honest with you about what I found, because I think you deserve the honest version and not the cleaned up one. What I found was worse than what I had anticipated. Not in degree, in kind. February 19th, the day of my heart attack. 4 hours after the ambulance left. Marcus and Sharon in my kitchen. Sharon on the phone with someone, her back to the camera, saying, I know, but this is actually the window. Can you be ready by the weekend? Marcus pouring bourbon at my kitchen counter at 4 in the afternoon, looking at his phone. Looking at the Zillow listing for my house that I could see clearly enough on his phone screen to confirm later on my own device. My house. Listed as an active comparable. He was running the numbers. February 21st. Marcus and Sharon in the living room the evening after they had moved in. Sharon saying she wanted the mirrors taken down because the arrangement was chaotic and she couldn't understand what Beverly had been going for. Marcus saying, yeah, we can do what we want with it now. Sharon saying, we should talk to that woman Gerald mentioned, the estate planner. Marcus saying, we have time. Sharon saying, do we? If he recovers well, we may not have as long as we thought. I sat in the quiet of the guest room of my own house, and I listened to my daughter-in-law calculate my recovery timeline as a constraint on their planning window. I kept watching. February 24th. Marcus alone in the kitchen, 11 at night, on the phone. I turned the audio all the way up. He was talking to someone I did not recognize, a male voice, and saying that his father's cardiologist had mentioned limitations on independent living and that he thought they could use that framing to initiate a capacity review. He mentioned a document. He said the document was almost ready and that he just needed to get his father to sign a few things while he was still on the recovery medications and not entirely tracking everything. He said his father had always trusted him, and that was the part they could use. I set the laptop down on the guest room bed. I did not do what Marcus had assumed I would do, which was not track everything. I was tracking everything. I had been tracking everything since November 2022, when I first looked across the Thanksgiving table and saw Sharon nod. I called Patricia the next morning. I said, Patricia, I need you to listen to something. I played her the February 24th audio over the phone. When it finished, she was quiet for 8 seconds. I counted. Then she said, Gerald, I need the full archive uploaded to my secure server today. Everything from May of last year to now. All of it. I said, I'll have it done by noon. She said, and Gerald, I want you to know that what Marcus described on that recording using a patient's post-surgical medication state to obtain signatures on documents that is not a gray area. That is elder financial abuse under Georgia law. Title 30. The kind of thing the Attorney General's Elder Protection Unit prosecutes. I said, I know. She said, I'm not going to move on that without your explicit direction. But I want you to understand the weight of what you have. I said, let's get through Tuesday first. Tuesday came the way Tuesdays come, ordinary and without announcement. I was in the kitchen at 7:30 with my coffee, the same coffee in the same mug I had used every morning for 11 years. Marcus came in at 8 to 10 in his robe, said good morning, said he thought we should talk about some things when I was feeling up to it, said there was no rush. He said it with the warmth he used when he was trying to make something feel like a natural conversation. I said I was feeling fine. I said I'd been feeling fine since Thursday. I said that actually I wanted to handle a couple of things today, and I had some calls to make. He said, of course. Take it easy, there's no rush. At 8:03, Roosevelt Gaines knocked on my front door. I stayed in the kitchen. I heard Marcus's footsteps on the stairs. I heard the front door open. I heard Roosevelt's voice, flat and professional, say, Mr. Marcus Moss, I am serving you with a notice to vacate this property on behalf of the trustee of the Lakeview Drive Family Trust, the legal holder of title to this residential property. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises and remove all personal property. Full details and contact information for the trustee are in the notice. Do you have any questions? The silence that followed that question was the longest silence I have ever heard inside this house. And this house has held a lot of silence in the last 2.5 years. Then Marcus said, and I want you to hear this because it is the sound of a plan encountering a wall it did not know was there, he said. What? What is this? Roosevelt said, the property is held in the Lakeview Drive Family Trust. You have no legal standing here. The trustee's contact information is in the packet. Have a good morning. The front door closed. 12 minutes of silence. Then Marcus's footsteps in the hallway. The kitchen door opening. He was holding the notice to vacate in both hands. He looked at me the way people look at something when they are hoping that looking at it again will change what it says. He said, Dad, what is this? I said, it's a notice to vacate, Marcus. He said, when did you do this? When did you put the house in a trust? I said, April of 2023, the month after your mother died. He said, why didn't you tell me? I said, because the trust is not for you to manage. It is for me to protect what your mother and I built together. Patricia Osei is the successor trustee. Darnell is the residential beneficiary. The document is thorough, and it is not challengeable. If you would like to confirm that, Patricia's number is in the packet. He stared at me. I watched him walk backward through the timeline in his head. Thanksgiving, 2022, the square footage, the estate planner referral, the continuing care community in Peachtree City. All of it. He was recalculating from the beginning and arriving, slowly, at the understanding that I had known, that I had been building a counterstructure the entire time he was building his. He said, you did this on purpose. You did this because you knew. I said, I did this because I am an accountant, Marcus. I have spent 41 years understanding what structures do when they are not correctly built. I could see what was coming, so I built ahead of it. He said, what does that mean? What did you see? I said, I think you know what I saw. He said, I was trying to help you. We were trying to help you. I looked at him for a long time. I thought about the Zillow listing on his phone 4 hours after my heart attack. I thought about February 24th and the phone call and the document that was almost ready. I thought about Beverly's mirrors in some box somewhere, wrapped in newspaper by a woman who had never understood what they meant or why they were hung at exactly that height. I said, I know what you were trying to do, Marcus, and I know what was on that phone at 4 p.m. on February 19th, and I know about the document, and I know about the phone call on February 24th. I know about all of it. The color left his face in stages. It is a thing I had not previously witnessed in 40 years of watching people understand what I know about their numbers. He said, what phone call? I said, Patricia has everything she needs. Your 48 hours start now. He left the kitchen. He and Sharon spoke in the master bedroom in voices that started low and got louder and then went low again. I heard Sharon begin to cry. I heard Caleb's voice somewhere upstairs asking why everyone was upset, that high, clear voice of a child who cannot yet read the architecture of adult disaster. I poured a second cup of coffee. I sat at Beverly's table in Beverly's kitchen in the light that came through the east window every morning until almost 11, and I thought about her. I thought about what she would have written in the notebook she kept in the junk drawer, the green spiral notebook where she recorded grocery lists and garden notes and things she wanted to remember. She would have written something precise and probably a little dry. She would have written it, capped the pen, and gone out to check on the seedlings. I called Patricia at 10:30. I told her Marcus had received the notice. I told her what he had said about the phone call. She said, good. Then she said, Gerald, I have to tell you something. I've reviewed the February 24th audio twice now, and I have an obligation to tell you directly that the language Marcus uses about obtaining signatures during a medication window that is prosecutable. That is not a civil matter. That is a criminal referral. I said, I understand. She said, what do you want to do? I looked at the window. I looked at Beverly's garden, still brown in March, the raised beds she had built herself out of cedar planks and determination, and 3 weekends of YouTube tutorials. I thought about Caleb upstairs asking why everyone was crying. I thought about Marcus at 12 years old in the back seat of our station wagon on the way home from a Little League game, still in his uniform, asleep against the window before we reached the highway. I said, Patricia, here is what I want to do. Send Marcus a letter, your letterhead. State that the trust has completed a full review of all archived footage. State that certain recorded conversations have been preserved and reviewed by counsel. State that no referral to the Attorney General's Elder Protection Unit has been made at this time. State that this is subject to change if any further action is taken regarding my estate, my capacity, my property, or any document purporting to bear my signature. And ask, specifically and in writing, whether Marcus is in possession of any such document and require a response within 5 business days. Patricia said, "That is measured, and it is appropriate, and it will almost certainly produce the document." She sent the letter on Wednesday. The following Monday, a sealed envelope arrived at her office by courier. Inside was a power of attorney document bearing a signature that was close enough to mine to be alarming and different enough from my actual signature to be demonstrably false. The notarization was reviewed. The notary's license was subsequently flagged for investigation by the Georgia Secretary of State's office. I did not push further. That is a decision I have thought about more than once in the months since, and I have arrived at the same conclusion each time. The document is in Patricia's possession. The footage is archived. The path to prosecution is documented and available. If Marcus does anything further, that path will be taken without hesitation. I have made that clear through Patricia. Marcus understands. He has not called since April. Darnell calls on Sunday evenings. He comes down twice a year now and stays for 5 days, and we sit on the back porch in the evenings and talk about his players, and about Beverly, and about all the ordinary things that deserve to be talked about. Beverly's mirrors are back on the hallway wall. It took me 3 Saturdays to find them. Sharon had packed them in 2 separate boxes in the attic and another Saturday to rehang them. I did not try to replicate Beverly's exact arrangement from memory, because I knew I would not get it right, and it would have felt like a forgery. Instead, I rehung them one at a time, slowly, trying to find the angle Beverly would have chosen for each one, and at the end of the 3rd Saturday, I stood in the hallway and looked at the wall and felt that something in the house had settled back into its correct position. Not identical to what Beverly made, but continuous with it, which is all any of us can ask for what we leave behind. The green reading chair is back in the corner of the living room. The garden came up strong this spring, better than I expected, because Beverly had amended the soil the last fall. She was well enough to garden, and that kind of preparation pays forward in ways that outlast the person who did it. The house on Lakeview Drive is still in the trust. Darnell is still the beneficiary. Patricia is still the successor trustee. Everything Beverly and I built is where we put it. The retirement accounts are intact. The practice, which I sold 60% of in 2021, still sends a quarterly distribution that arrives without drama and without anyone's hand in it. I want to speak directly to you before I finish this, and I mean directly, not just as words on a screen. If you have spent your years building something, a house, a practice, a retirement, a life that carries the memory of someone you loved, and you have felt someone testing the edges of it, probing for the soft places, dressing their ambition as your benefit, I want you to hear this. The time to build the wall is before they find the door, not after. Before. Patricia told me in our first meeting that the most valuable thing she could do for any client was make sure the structure existed before the stress arrived. She was right. She is almost always right, which is why I pay her what I pay her. Do not wait for the emergency to become the structure. Build the structure. Find your Patricia. Make your Darnell the beneficiary before the Marcuses of the world have had time to measure the bedroom. Beverly left me a notebook. I found it in the junk drawer 3 weeks after she died, the green spiral one, and I have read it more times than I will tell anyone. Near the back, written in her handwriting, specific, unhurried, neither large nor small, she had written a single line that I do not believe was written for any particular reason. I think she wrote it the way she wrote everything, because it was true and because she wanted to remember it. She wrote, "The prepared life is the protected one." I think about that line every time I sit at the kitchen table in the morning light. I thought about it on a cold Thursday when a process server knocked on my front door, and my son learned the actual dimensions of what he had walked into. I think about it now. Beverly understood how I think. She always did. She would have seen all of this coming before I did, which is not something I say easily. She would have said something exact and a little dry, and then gone out to check on the seedlings. She would have been right, as she almost always was. And she would have been glad, I think, to know that what she helped build is still standing exactly where we put it, intact, cared for, and not going anywhere. If this story stayed with you, if you recognize something in it, or someone you love is in the middle of their own version of it, drop a comment and tell me which moment hit you hardest. Share this with the person who needs to hear it. Hit the like button if this is the kind of story you want to keep seeing. Subscribe so you're here when the next one comes, because every story on this channel is about someone who built something real and made sure it stayed real. I'll see you in the next one.